Okay, Robert Bauval is back again for his second talk. He needs no introduction because he was here yesterday.
Let's go.
So you're going to talk about something different now, I guess.
Very different.
Okay.
Well, so you've come for another 2 hours. Brave. Yes, I'll be talking about something entirely different. And, oh, where is she? There was a young lady here who, during one of the meals, came to me and said, "I wish you were our history teacher." I don't see myself as that, but this book that I will speak about, by the way, I've decided to do a bit of a change to this talk that I'm giving. Yesterday, I kind of pushed it a bit with my workshop thing. And I kept sort of throwing teasers, and I gather many of you may not come to this workshop. So I've decided, and for one good reason, we're the summer solstice today. By the way, happy summer solstice. A big day in the ancient world, by the way. And today, and for the next few days, since Dolores was, you were showing a movie about Glastonbury? Yeah. There's usually over 500,000 people who gather in Glastonbury for the summer solstice. Glastonbury and Stonehenge and Avebury, this is a big area. And
England is at Glastonbury.
oh, wow.
Because we have an office in England that takes care of Europe. And it's right there in that magical country of Glastonbury.
Oh, yeah. Glastonbury is within half an hour drive from the big sites like Stonehenge and Avebury. And I used to give lectures there, by the way. The last one was in Marlborough with the crop circles and all these mysterious things that are happening there. Why did I speak of this? Ah, yeah, summer solstice. Summer solstice was a big deal, a big deal in the ancient world. And you've heard yesterday that the ancient Egyptians clicked on the idea of what might be causing the flood and how this eventually was converted into a religious idea and a rebirth rituals and led to the pyramids. The Vatican Heresy. Before I get to the Vatican Heresy, I enjoyed very much the talk of Natalie. Very, very touching how somebody converted a terrible experience into a very positive thing. I mean, it's quite amazing how she has managed to do this. In my ripe age of 66, I've come to, I'm looking at things much more simply in my life. And I spoke yesterday of St. Francis, I think I did at some occasion. There's one episode that has marked me a lot in the story of Francis of Assisi. By the way, I am not religious. I am not into Catholicism. Don't get the wrong idea of this book, although I was born in a Catholic family. In fact, I revolted against Catholicism for various reasons. It's not that I don't believe in God, I do. I believe in something, but I'm not quite sure how to define it. But one thing that marked me with the story of Francis of Assisi, and it's beautifully represented in this wonderful film of Franco Zeffirelli, Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon. And I remind you again, if you haven't seen it, try and see it. It's on Google. You can get it free on Google now. In very brief, he was a man born in a very, very rich Italian family in Assisi. And in those days, the pride of this family was to send their male children to the Crusades, to war. And you couldn't have thought of somebody more inapt for this. He, you know, as a future saint, if you like, was sent on the Crusades. And the horror that he saw, the terrible, terrible cruelties. And he returns a broken man, completely broken. He is in a state of complete depression, complete mental breakdown. And he doesn't want to talk to anybody, he doesn't want to see anybody, he doesn't want to live. And he's simply lying in bed and dying. And there's this wonderful, wonderful moment, an epiphany. I spoke about my epiphany yesterday with the wild boar, and he's in bed, lying in bed, and the scene is so well done in the film, and he's sweating, and he's total turmoil, his mind is totally blank, and the balcony is open. There's a lovely breeze, very slight breeze. There's wonderful summers in that part of Italy. The sun is shining, and the little bird comes on the ledge. And it's chirping, and it's picking up bits of grain that were there, and he has the epiphany. The epiphany is, he is there, dying, miserable. He's fed up with life. And that little bird is singing, and it's happy. And he wants to be happy like the bird. And he remembers the gospel. He remembers the gospel of be like the birds. It's so simple. Life, to me, is a mystery. It's not to be explained. It's to be enjoyed. It's to be enjoyed as much as you can. And he suddenly changes, and there's this wonderful, wonderful scene where he goes. The city of San Francisco is named after him. The hippie movement, some of you may remember, the flower movement, began because of him. He was the patron saint of the hippies. He's regarded as the first hippie of the 13th century. There's a wonderful story of him going to Egypt. He actually goes to Egypt during the 5th Crusade. And he wants to stop the crusade, and he goes to meet the Sultan, the nephew of Saladin. They thought he was mad, that he would be cut to pieces. And the Sultan receives him, and they have a conversation. We don't know what happened. He stayed for 5 days. I went to visit the tomb of the Sultan, and it's written, I was proud to meet Francis of Assisi. Incredible man. But the point is that he thought it's very simple. It's really very simple. Just be happy. Try and be happy. We can complicate it as much as we want. We can make it extremely complicated or very simple. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say. Now, on with the Vatican Heresy. What is the Vatican Heresy? I should say that I wrote this book with a lot of gusto. It's totally out of my sphere. I never thought I would write a book about the Vatican. But I was there in Rome in 1978. In fact, I tell the story in the book. Literally on the day that the Pope, John Paul I, died. He's a Pope that ruled for 30 days only. And there was the whole city of Rome was in mourning, and the shops were closed and everything. And I went to the Piazza St. Peter. Who's been to Rome, by the way? Oh, quite a few, huh? And I went to the Piazza St. Peter, this famous, they call it a square, in fact, it's an ellipse. And it first occurred to me, this is very strange, I never thought about it, an obelisk in the middle of the piazza, an Egyptian obelisk with a cross on top. It's actually an obelisk that comes from the city of Heliopolis in Egypt. He was brought to Rome in the year 50 AD. The city of Heliopolis, the city of the sun, Heliopolis, the city of the sun. And it stuck in my mind. This was 1978. A lot of things happened then. I wrote many books since. You've heard about the Orion Mystery and all these things. And then, recently, I found myself in Rome, and I go to Rome very often. And by one of these strange synchronicities, I met one of the names, one of the co-authors, Chiara Hohenzollner. She's a rather cute lady. She's in her mid-30s. She's a student, well, a graduate of Latin and Renaissance studies. And the name you see there, actually, is, we had to change it in the book. She's actually called Chiara Dainelli, but in the middle, in fact, 2 months after we started planning on this book, she married a prince. You know, it's one of those, she met him on Facebook. So it happens, you know, fairy tales come through on Facebook. He is the great-grandson of the Kaiser, William II. And she called me up and says, we'll have to change my name, I'm getting married. And so we did. She talks on radio, you might hear her. She talks on a few American channels. And a lovely, lovely man called Sandro Ziccari. Sandro Ziccari is a professor of statistics at the University of Rome. And we met by sheer luck at a conference. And I said I was planning an article. I wasn't planning a book. I was planning an article on Bernini. Bernini, the famous architect, the architect of the Pope of the early, mid 17th century. Bernini, you've heard of Bernini in Angel and Demons. Come on, everybody's heard of Bernini these days because of Dan Brown. I'm so jealous of Dan Brown. We're not going to beat that, Dolores, are we? Anyway, Bernini, the great papal architect. Let's start, but the story actually starts rather in an odd manner here. You see the cover of the book here. And we see a man here. We go back to Egypt. Funny how many things start in Egypt. Sometime around the 1st century before Christ, sometime around there, we're not quite sure, when we're at the end of this long, long pharaonic civilization. Cleopatra has committed her famous suicide. Rome has turned Egypt into a province of Rome, Augustus Caesar, and it's the end. The end of this glorious, marvelous civilization. And it seems that some unknown writers, priests perhaps, decided to save the magical religion of the ancient Egyptians. They feared that it would get lost. One thing strangely about the ancient Egyptians is that they didn't have a word for religion. You keep hearing about the Egyptian religion, there are books about Egyptian religion, but they didn't have a word for religion. They called it Hika. Hika means magic. Not pulling a rabbit out of a hat. They saw the whole existence as magical. Everything was magical. And there's a famous saying in the books that I'm about to describe. These authors got together and wrote a series of books. The books of Hermes. Hermes thrice the Great. Hermes Trismegistos. The Hermetic books. There's a wonderful phrase that comes to mind. I was going to say it later, but why not now? What a wonderful thing man is, humans are. They saw it as humans as the most magical thing in this universe. We are magical, incredible. We are pure magic. These texts disappeared. People in Europe during the Middle Ages knew of the existence of these texts because they heard it through various writers, but the texts had disappeared. And we come to this man. This man. He is the ruler of Florence, and the year is 1460. By the way, speaking of history, this is how history, I wish they would teach history like this in schools. The history of how one is to look at a part of history, not the dry, textual history. Cosimo de' Medici, the Doge, the ruler of Florence, a great, great scholar. But the luck would have it that his adopted son, Marsilio Ficino, happened to be a genius. He was a priest as well. Spoke 9 languages. Since childhood, he had learned ancient Greek, Latin, of course. He spoke Coptic. He had learned Arabic, Hebrew. And luck would have it that he sends emissaries. This man, Cosimo de' Medici, is on the verge of death. He's 69 years old, and in those days they died early. And he wants, his dream, his passion, was to have the ancient books translated so that people can read them. He has commissioned Ficino to translate the books of Plato that had been banned by the church when they closed the academy in Athens, the Platonic academy. In fact, Ficino, Cosimo de' Medici, is the creator of the new Platonic academy in Florence. It still exists, the Platonic academy in Florence. And the idea was to translate the book of Plato, and his adopted son, is busy translating the books of Plato, but something happens. One of his emissaries is in Macedonia, in ancient Macedonia, and visits a monastery. And the priest there, trying to make money, says, "We have ancient books, would you like to buy them? Because we know that your boss in Florence collects these books for the academy, would you like to buy them?" God knows what he paid, probably a pittance for it. I'm trying to remember the name of this little monk. I can just visualize him in this monastery with this bundle of books, and he rides his donkey. Apparently he's on a donkey riding back all the way to Florence. And he enters Florence and he goes straight to Marsilio. He goes to the ruler and says, "I have books for you. I have books for you. They're written in this strange, ancient Greek language." And he calls Ficino. And Ficino opens the bundle and he sees the title. And it's like opening the tomb of Tutankhamun. You know, I use the same phrase, I see wonderful things. He turns to his mentor and he says, "I see wonderful things. We have the books of Hermes Trismegistus. The 10 books have been found." It created what is known as the Hermetic tradition. The Hermetic tradition, which I'm about to tell you now, and how it affected the modern world and how it created this bizarre story that I'm about to tell you. Now, at this point, before I tell you this story, I've decided to try and do it within the hour, all right? Within the hour. So I won't digress too much, because what I want to do, as I was saying earlier, is to save the other hour, or maybe 45 minutes, to do part of what I said I was going to do during the workshop thing, to tell you more about the pyramids. I think it's fair enough, for those, okay? All right. So what happens? The books, he says, here's the famous phrase, one of the great Hermetic scholars of the modern world, Dame Frances Yates. If you haven't read it, you should read it. Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition. Mark this down. It's a book everybody should read. Giordano Bruno and the Hermetic Tradition. It was written in 1981 by Dame Frances Yates. Because Cosimo de' Medici tells his Ficino, forget about Plato. I mean, forget about the great Plato. Put him aside and translate Hermes. Translate the book of Hermes. I want to see them before I die. And he translates them. He has them ready, and he reads one of the first books, known as the Poimander. It has a very strange title, to Ficino on his deathbed. The books get copied. It's the days before the printing press. Copies get sent. And it's like an intellectual atom bomb, because these books are proposing the opposite of what the Vatican was doing with religion. We're now in the 15th century, coming out of the Dark Ages. The church has become oppressive. It burns books instead of encouraging knowledge. It is preventing knowledge. Scholars do not know what to do anymore. They are blocked. The advancement of knowledge is at a standstill. It's a dark moment. And these books say the opposite. They encourage the pursuit of knowledge. They even suggest, contrary to the church, that man and women, human beings, through knowledge, can become divine, can reach divinity. That the spark of divinity, the spark of knowledge is in them. And they must pursue, they must seek. It's a quest. Life is a quest. And what they try to do is the impossible. Some of these Hermetic philosophers that emerge, you read all about them in the book if you get a copy. One of them, the most daring of all, is Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno. I was in Rome not long ago. I always do a pilgrimage to the Campo Fiore to see the statue of Giordano Bruno, where they burned him there. They burned him for what he tried to do. He tried to do something quite incredible. He wasn't the only one, but he went way, way beyond the point. What many of these Hermetic philosophers wanted to do was to convince the Vatican to canonize the books of Hermes, to make them part of the canonized books. And the reason they want to do that was that if they did so, the church, the dominant church, the Vatican, would be hopefully encouraging knowledge rather than repressing it. Of course, it was something almost impossible to do. Many of them suffered. Many of them were put in prison. I'll tell you about some of them as we go along. But the one who tried most, but he tried. He didn't just want to have the books canonized. He actually wanted to completely reform the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church had gone astray. Hence, Francis of Assisi earlier, rather than the apostolic mission of compassion, of helping the poor, of allowing liberty and freedom, which was the beginning, the root, it had become oppressive, it had become decadent, it had become opulent. And he wanted to reform it. Maybe naively. Quite a courageous man, though. He traveled around Europe. He was a Dominican priest. He defrocked himself. and went preaching this new philosophy around Europe. He went all the way to the court of Elizabeth I, by the way, the Virgin Queen. I'll have to skip a lot here because so much is in there. It was an incredible research that we did, the three of us. And finally, he decides to go back to Rome. There's a new pope, and he hopes that perhaps this new pope may perhaps consider this idea of using these Hermetic books. Big mistake. Big mistake. He's arrested by the Inquisition. He's arrested by the Inquisition. He's tried. We're now 30 years, by the way. He's tried on the year 1600. We're just 30 years away from Galileo, which we'll be speaking in a minute. I get this thing when I speak about this moment because my neck begins to sort of shiver because of the courage, the incredible courage of the Inquisition, and they show him the torture and the pain, what they're going to do if he admits to his so-called heresy. The heresy was to say that there is books from ancient Egypt that are saying all these wonderful things. He's the first man, by the way, as far as we know in all of history, and this is one of the points that he was convicted on, to suggest that there are other worlds. There are other worlds. It's quite incredible. And they're very angry. The Inquisition is very angry that they're suggesting that there are other worlds out there. And they face him with the terrible, terrible verdict that if he doesn't recant, he is going to be burned to death, alive. Can you imagine facing that possibility? That horrible, horrible. Apparently, it's the most awful death you can imagine. And he's there, and the statue, it's written, if you ever go to Rome, go to the Campo di Fiore. He is brooding there. They made the statue in the 1800s. Here he is. I think it might be small. We might be able to enlarge it. That's him in very small. Oh, can we enlarge this? I don't know how to. Computers aren't my thing. Just a bit more so they can see it. I couldn't get a larger picture. There we are. The statue is actually at the place where he got burned. They drag him out of the papal dungeons. They prevent him from talking. Apparently, they stick needles in his mouth, in his lips, and they tie him on the stake. But during the trial, he says something quite incredible. And I always wonder. You know, we think we can face, we're courageous, but I always wonder about myself. Could I possibly have that courage? Because when they are about to give the verdict, give him a last chance, would you recant? Would you recant? Or we're going to pass judgment on you and we will burn you to death. And they wear the black cap, and you can see them sitting there, and he's right in front of them, and he raises his hands and he points at each one of them and he says, "You are more frightened to pass judgment on me than I am to receive it." Incredible courage. And they drag him out, and he's at the stake, and they tie him up, and they try to brandish a cross, and he turns his face, and they burn him to death. He's the symbol, he's become the symbol to all scientists, the symbol of this repressive attitude that man, that religious systems, if they go too far, can have on human beings. Apparently, there's a new statue of him being that was raised in Germany recently. There are many things going on at that time. No, there's no over picture. A few years before, America is discovered, the New World. Incredible moment in history. There is a new world. And the Vatican loves it. A new world to convert. Because what is also happening at the same time is something that nobody could have predicted. Oops, where am I? I think I've jumped a few pictures here. This guy. Nobody predicted. These funny things that happen in history. A man comes to Rome from Germany. He comes for the bicentennial, for the centennial celebrations of Pope Innocenti X. And he's utterly disgusted by what he sees. He's absolutely shocked at what goes on there. The opulence of the cardinals, the gold, the waste of resources, and the poor people starving in the street. He's, of course, Martin Luther. He goes back to Germany with his famous 900 theses and splits the Christian church into two. Suddenly, the impossible happens to the Vatican. Half of Europe splits away. It becomes a Protestant Christianity. And they fight it. This horror of the 30-year war, genocide from both sides. The Protestants try to convert the Catholics, bring them out, and the Catholics, the Vatican tries to regain back the Protestants by force. For 30 years, they fight it, mostly in Northern Europe. And who is at the head of the Protestant army is the Swedish king, Gustav Adolfo II. I say this because you're going to see he had a very, very, very strange daughter. You're going to love her if you haven't heard about her. Queen Christina of Sweden. He dies in battle, by the way, Gustavo, in 1632. Nobody wins. They try and have the so-called Peace of Westphalia. There he is, by the way. I have to sort of bend my head to see what we're doing. And there is the so-called Peace of Westphalia. They sign a treaty after 30 years of battle, after terrible genocide, burning each other from each side, cutting each other to pieces. Europe is in a mess. They decide that we can't win. We're going to sign a treaty. He dies the king of Sweden dies, and his daughter is 6 years old, and she becomes Queen of Sweden. Just retain this, we're going to leave it on the side. She's going to come back and do something quite extraordinary with the Vatican as we go on in our story. They used to call her the Cleopatra of the North, by the way. Maybe I should talk a bit more about her. They did a movie, by the way, with Greta Garbo, I think in the 1950s. Apparently she spoke 9 languages, like Cleopatra of Egypt. She was very much into this Hermetic studies. She collected books. Her big thing was books. Her father, who conquered half of Europe, would go and bring all the books from libraries of the countries they had conquered and bring it to her. She even had some of the top academics and scientists come to teach her in her court. One of them, she brought him when she was at the age of 18, was the famous Rene Descartes, the Cartesian French mathematician. He taught her mathematics and astronomy. Can you imagine a one-to-one with Rene Descartes? It's a bit Alexander the Great with Aristotle. Poor Rene Descartes died in her court. Apparently she insisted that he began lessons at 5 in the morning in Sweden in the middle of winter. He caught pneumonia and died there. Christina of Sweden. They say she was a hermaphrodite, by the way, somebody was asking. She remained a virgin all her life. But something rather odd happened. Remember, her father was at the head of the Protestant armies. He was the most vilified enemy of the Pope. And yet something very odd happens when she's 24. Apparently she had a terrible depression. Nobody knows why. when she recovers from this depression, she announces something that absolutely shocks the Protestant world. She announces that she's going to convert back to Catholicism. And the Pope loves it. Can't believe it. It's like Osama bin Laden decides to become American. Can't believe that Christina of Sweden actually, apparently, they sent 2 emissaries in secret to her court, 2 Jesuits, because something else is happening. While all this is happening, they discovered the new world. There is the split of the Christian church, and we have these guys. In 1540, in the middle of all this mess, comes 6 Spanish people to the Vatican. They're ex-soldiers. One of them is Ignatius of Loyola. Ignatius of Loyola goes to the Pope and says, listen, I have a great idea. I have a great idea. Can you make us priests? And we will set up an order. We're going to call it the Order of Jesus, the Jesuits. And the idea is we're going to use this order. We're going to build a college. We're going to call it the College of Propaganda. And we're going to convert for you. How about it? We're going to go to the New World. Because why bother with all these heretic Protestants? You know, they don't want to come back. We fought for 30 years, but hey, why waste our time here? There's a whole new world out there to convert. Let's go for it. That's how South America was converted, by the way. The Protestants had a better time here in Northern Africa. You had the Anglo-Saxons coming here and through the Protestant movements. But all of South America very quickly got converted into Catholicism. In fact, to the point where, well, we're going to get there at the end of the talk, the very last, the actual Pope we have now is a Jesuit. He's the first Jesuit Pope, by the way. How did they do it? How did they manage to go in places like South America, in China? Had terrible success in China. They converted in China en masse. India. Half of the Indian continent was converted by these Jesuits. They even came to Egypt. How did they do it? How did they do it? And they did it by using an idea. And that's where we come to this idea of the city of the sun. Because many of these cultures had been following, like the ancient Egyptian, a solar religion, a sun religion. And they thought, how about it? How about making Christianity into a solar religion? How about it? We go and sell them this idea. All I have to do is change the names. And we can impress them. We can impress them with our new science. Show them telescopes, show them mirrors, show them all sorts of things, guns. And we impress them with this, and we tell them, our God is better than yours, but it's the same one. All you have to do is change his name. I don't want to linger on that, because we're going to get now this guy. Because in the midst of all this, in the midst of the schism of the church, Protestant Catholicism, the discovery of the New World, the formation of the Jesuit order, something is about to change everything. Everything is about to change because of this guy. Copernicus. Johann Copernicus. Johann Copernicus proposes, by studying mathematics, proposes something totally revolutionary. Literally, the word revolution comes from his discovery. The word revolution. And it's not about people fighting, it's about the fact, that it wasn't, as the church believed, that the earth was at the center of the visible universe. No. The Earth was going around the sun and not the other way around. But this, more than the Hermetic philosophers that were trying to reform the church, fell bang in the face of the Vatican. According to the Vatican, this was against scriptures. It was the worst heresy to suggest that the Earth isn't at the center of the visible universe. That, and better still, the very center of the Earth, the Vatican. They declare it, not yet, they tolerated it for a while, because it was a theory. It was a theory. Well, as long as it's a theory, people can perhaps believe it and not believe it. This is what he was suggesting. This is actually one of his original diagrams. Very colorful, with the sun in the middle and things rotating around it. One of them is our planet, the third planet from the sun. But then comes another guy. There comes another guy, more annoying, because he says, Copernicus was right. He's Johannes Kepler. Kepler, using the more refined mathematical and observations from his boss in the court in Poland, works out that Copernicus was right, but there was a slight adjustment to do this. The Earth and the planets were not going around the sun in circles, but in elliptical paths. That even bothered more the church, because it was bad enough to suggest that it wasn't the Earth that was at the center, but at least the circle was a perfect, according to them, a perfect shape. Now, not only creation was not what they wanted it to be, but it was not so perfect. How can it be that God, who created this, is not perfect? Here is what Kepler suggested. You're seeing a pencil. Can you see it there? It's a pencil at the top. This is how you draw an ellipse, by the way, in case you want to do it. The ellipse has two focal points, unlike a circle that has a central point, right? So there are two axes. Let me use this. Here is an axis, the long axis and the short axis. They cross in the middle, of course. So the ellipse has a center, but its focal points are on the side. One here, one there. And the sun occupies one focal point. Now, this is not an astronomical lesson, by the way. This is how to show you that something very weird has actually happened, because this is the truth. This is the truth. The truth that the Vatican was denying. And there is one man that comes along. This is still theory, and it's still tolerated. He publishes, by the way, in 1506. Am I right? Yeah? Whoops. Hello. I'm kind of stuck again. I think I know how to do it. I did it. In 1605. So we're 5 years from when poor Giordano Bruno got burned. He got burned in 1600, 5 years later. It's still tolerated by the church because it is theory. They don't like it. They ban the books, but they yet don't declare it a heresy. They think it's going to go away. And it doesn't go away because comes another one, and this time he's not Polish, he is not German, he is Italian, to make it worse. He is Galileo Galilei. And many people think, by the way, it's rather odd when you talk about this, that they think that Galileo is the man who discovered the heliocentric theory, the fact that the sun is at the center. No, Galileo proved it. How did he prove it? Because he invented the telescope. He invented the telescope. And he's the first man, it's kind of spooky. I love this idea that he's the first man who actually puts this and he goes, wow. Imagine the first man looking at the telescope and he sees planets. He sees moons going around Mars. For the first time after the creation of this planet, 4.5 billion years, he's the first one to look at a planet. Now, that becomes very annoying. Oh no, who's that? It becomes very, very annoying. Very annoying because now Galileo is buddies with the Pope Urban VIII. They're friends. They're friends. And he goes and they have discussion about this. And the Pope says, listen, take it easy. You can talk about this. You can discuss this. I'll tolerate it. But if you say you can prove it, I'm not going to like it. But hey, he's the first man who can prove the truth. Is he going to shut up? No, he's not going to shut up. He's going to go end his life by saying, I could have proved the most important discovery ever. I have found how this universe is made, at least our visible universe, and the Pope wants me to shut up. But the Pope says, you can't publish, you can't write. So he writes a fictional book. He writes a fictional book, and he tells a story of a man who has a discussion with another man. And obviously one is modeled on him, who defends this theory, and the other one, presumably, is modeled on the Pope. He denied it, but in fact he probably had the Pope in mind, who is called Simplicio. Simplicio doesn't please the Pope, and of course, who wins the argument is the one, and the Pope goes bananas. He goes bananas, he feels terribly insulted, apart from the fact that Galileo is doing exactly the opposite. Apparently, Galileo invited the cardinals. He set up a telescope in Florence, and he says, have a look. I mean, look, like I said with Groucho Marx yesterday, don't believe what I say. Believe what your own eyes show you. Don't have to believe what I say. See with your own eyes. And they refused to look at the telescope. They refused to look through the telescope. That's how bad it was. And he's arrested. He's arrested, and he, like Giordano Bruno, faces the Inquisition. Faces the Inquisition. But he's an old man. He's 69 years old. Showing the torture instruments. They tell him they're going to burn him alive. And he does what Giordano Bruno did not do, but one can understand. He recants. He recants knowing that he's recounting the truth. What a terrible, terrible thing to do to a human being. To make him admit what he knows to be as truth. And they, as he walks out, they put him in house arrest. And you know, I don't know if you know this famous phrase. As he walks out and he's held by two cardinals, he shakes his head and he says, "E pura gira." But it turns, he says. The earth turns. What a sad thing. Now we're going to jump back to the year 50. Caligula. Christianity hasn't become yet the official religion of Rome. We're now back in time. I'm showing you this man because he went to Alexandria. It caused a massacre there, but he brought back a gift. He brought a souvenir. He brought back an obelisk. The obelisk that's in the Piazza St. Peter. He took it from the city of Heliopolis and brought it to Rome. The pictures are a bit small. Let me get to the bigger pictures. And he places it in the circus known as the Circus Caligula. This is where they burned and tortured and fed the Christians to lions. And the obelisk is placed at the center. There it is. You can see very faintly. Sorry about the size of the pictures. And next to it, by the way, is a temple of Isis. He was a follower of Isis. A bizarre follower of Isis. And now, it's a bit, so let me explain what you're looking at. We now move to 3 centuries ahead. The obelisk is still somewhere here. The circus is virtually destroyed. We're now 3 centuries away. And happened something quite extraordinary. I was telling Katrina, where are you, Katrina? There is a moment in history where everything's about to change. Everything is about to change. You wouldn't be here, I wouldn't be here if this moment didn't happen. Rome is in the hands of the Emperor Maxentius. Rome was always ruled, for the first 3 centuries, by 3 emperors at the same time, the triumvirs, they used to call them. One of them is Constantine. General Constantine is occupying Gaul and England, what is ancient England. And he marches with his armies to the gates of Rome. The year is 312 AD. And he's about to have battle with Maxentius on the famous Milvian Bridge, which is still there if you go to Rome. And on the eve of the battle, at dawn, he wakes up, and there's apparently a sign in the sky. We don't know exactly what happened. A meteorite, a burst in the clouds, something happened. And a man next to him, by sheer amazing synchronicity and luck, is one of these Hermetic Christian philosophers, a fellow called Lactantius. And he says, this is the sign of the Christ. By this sign, you will conquer the battle tomorrow. And Constantine gives the order to his officers to have the sign of the Christ, which is the famous chi rho, an X with a P, the ancient Greek letters, the first 2 letters of Christ. C-R, chi rho. Not the cross yet. And he has painted on the shields of the soldiers. And as amazing fate would have it, he wins the battle in the name of the Christ. In his idea, the Christ wasn't the meek apostolic carpenter that got crucified on the cross. He was this amazing solar god like Apollo, that helped him into battle. Poor Jesus, who would have thought, my God, the Roman general is using me to go into battle, to slaughter people. But so he did, and so is born Catholicism. Is born the official religion of Rome, just like that. And within 2 centuries, the Roman Empire is converted. It's amazing that a sign in the sky, whatever it is, has changed the world, for better or for worse, I don't know, but it did. And now we move, because he is going to build a memoriam to this event. He builds the first Vatican, the old Vatican as it is known, and here it is. We have depictions of it. It's totally destroyed, of course. There's a new Vatican there. There it is. And the year is 323, the old Vaticanus. Actually, if you're interested in mysteries about alignments, you'll see, I'll talk later about the alignment of this. But if you pull a line from the center of the Vatican and you project it, it's actually a latitude, and you project it and you keep going and you keep going and you keep going, it will cross another cathedral that he built in Turkey, the famous Hagia Sophia, the cathedral dedicated originally to the goddess of wisdom, Sophia. It's quite amazing. They actually link together through this latitude, but that's another story. You'll find it in the book. Now here is the site of where is going to be the new Vatican. Look at the obelisk. We're now back to this old circus of Caligula. You see the obelisk here? I've used this picture very faintly. This is the old Vatican, and here's the new one. Here's the new one. Back. Let's go forward. Now, we're jumping centuries. within the year, let me get this right, 1540-ish, and the Pope in time, Paul III, if I remember well, decides to build a new Vatican. And he calls the famous architect Bramante. And they design the new plans, and they're about to knock this down. This is the old Vatican. The old Vatican, they're about to knock it down and build a new one. Many great architects and artists get involved. One of them, you know very well, Michelangelo, who builds the cupola. Look at this. Can you see a faint arrow? I've put it there in blue. I don't know if you can see it from there. The Vatican, the old Vatican, and there is here, a fountain. Bear this in mind. It's very interesting what's going to happen. A fountain on the side. Here is Bramante, we're going to skip. And he designs this plan. He designed this plan known as the Greek cross. The popes aren't too keen on this. They prefer a Latin cross. It's missing the stem. They start building this. Michelangelo comes and puts the cupola at the center. Then they bring Baderno in 1603. Baderno extends the Vatican. Here is the cross, and he extends the nave. And it is as it is now. It looks like a Latin cross, right? This man, Sixtus V, Pope Sixtus V, decides to bring the obelisk now. This is a depiction of how they removed the obelisk. Apparently, they used 900 horses and 2,000 men. It took them a year to move this obelisk. Just to give you an idea how the Egyptians might have moved it. They bring it and they cart it from the old circus. It's about 300 yards away. And they place it in front of the Vatican, the new Vatican. There is now an Egyptian obelisk of the City of the Sun in front of the Vatican. This is an actual picture of it, with the sun shining over it. Very interesting character, but I'm going to skip this. Well, no, a fellow called Athanasius Kircher. Athanasius Kircher is a German monk who, for some reason, got it in his mind to try and translate the hieroglyphs on these obelisks. And he's brought to Rome, and he sets up the Kircher. He's a Jesuit, and he becomes the director of the Jesuit Museum, the Jesuit College, which I was telling you earlier, and he is an astronomer. He's an astronomer. Bear this in mind, because it gets really very interesting now. And that's how he visualizes. He actually recognizes the obelisk of the Vatican as being Obeliscus Heliopolitanus, the obelisk from the City of the Sun. The obelisk from the City of the Sun. There's my friend Sandro, by the way. Just as a curiosity, if you go to Rome, we're the first one to actually write about this, and many Romans now are going to take pictures. Look very carefully. The obelisk is at the center of the axis. You see the two columns here? And the obelisk here? But it's not at the center of the cupola. It's as if the man who placed the obelisk made a mistake. Just put it a little bit on the side. You can see it in the next picture here. There. It's now with the cupola, but it's no more at the center of the columns, you see? It's been shifted. It's always been thought to be a mistake, but it isn't. It isn't. It isn't. The reason is that we know the architect who placed the obelisk, a fellow called Fontana, placed it on the axis of the old Vatican before they destroyed it. And there is a reason, and a very curious reason. We come to this guy now. Sorry. We come to Clavius. What is happening at this moment, they're placing the obelisk, and something very bizarre is going to happen as well. So many things were happening at the same time. The Pope, Gregorian XIII, wants to change the calendar. The calendar has slipped 10 days from the spring equinox. which was used to work out the day of Easter. Easter is worked out as the, if I remember well, the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox. That's how they work out the date of Easter. That's why it shifts every year. But now, the old calendar, the old Julian calendar had slipped because they didn't adjust for this very slight adjustment that needs to be done in order to keep along the astronomical year, and we now have the Gregorian calendar. It probably was a propaganda. They wanted, remember, now by that time, half Christianity is Protestant. They hate the Pope. And they're not going to accept the Gregorian calendar. They're not going to call their calendar the Gregorian calendar under the name of the Pope. It took about 2 centuries, by the way, for America to accept the Gregorian calendar. England, about the same time. In fact, since you might be interested, George Washington was born before the change, and the change occurred in 1752, if I remember well, which was after his birth. Is that right? And so his date of birth has to be adjusted by 10 days, by the way, in case you... It's very odd. If you see tombs in America that are before 1752, they're wrong by 10 days, by the way. Yeah, anyway, another trivial information. The reason I'm telling you this is that the reason that the Jesuits were getting involved with all these astronomical calculations is because by then they had become mathematicians and astronomers. Many of them were busy converting in South America and various places, and the ones in Rome were used as the Pope's scientists, mainly for this kind of work. And now we come to our story. This man is Alexander VII. Alexander VII, Pope Alexander VII. You see his name all over the Piazza St. Peter. In May 1655, he becomes Pope. He is 30 years before, he became a very, very good friend of the Jesuit Athanasius Kircher. And the odd thing about this Pope is that he was interested in this Hermetic business, very educated. He had spent a lot of time in Germany, had a fascination for astronomy. And he calls this man Bernini, Gian Lorenzo Bernini. And he says, I want you to design me a piazza around this obelisk in front of the Vatican. We're at a moment in time. That's what Bernini sees. Remember, the obelisk was placed, it's an empty area. There's the obelisk that was placed a few years before, and there's this old fountain on the side. Right? Eventually he designs this. Now, we spend a lot of time in this book about something, because Bernini has left a document. And he talks about what the Pope and him wanted to do with this piazza. And he says, it's a very strange drawing that you see there, of a kind of a man with his hands this way, right? It's supposed to symbolize Mother Church. Strangely, it's a man, but anyway, it's supposed to symbolize Mother Church gathering the pilgrims and the heretics back to the fold in the piazza. Hence, the shape of the piazza is what they say. You know, when, I think they do this in the States, when somebody goes to court as a witness, they put his hand on the Bible, right? What does he say? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Why do they say this? Why not enough to say, do you swear to tell the truth? because you could tell a truth has many layers. A truth has many layers. You can tell part of the truth, but if you don't tell the whole truth, you may not reveal what you want to reveal. True? Well, I don't know why I'm thinking of this, but a naughty boy who plays in the garden and breaks something that in the garage, he breaks his father's car or something. And they say, were you in the garage? And he says, yes. But he doesn't say what he did in the garage, right? Try and imagine that you were with the Pope that had declared the heliocentric, not this one, the previous Pope, Urban II. We're 30 years away from the trial of Galileo. We're 60 years away from the burning of Giordano Bruno. At the trial of Galileo, the previous Pope has said, now this heliocentric theory is a heresy. The Vatican Heresy. Whoever speaks about the heliocentric theory, whoever writes about it, whoever is heard speaking about it to others, is committing a heresy punishable by death. All these Jesuit astronomers, all the people who knew the truth, because we're now 50 years after Galileo. 30 years after Galileo, we're 50 years after Kepler. All scientists around the world have accepted the heliocentric theory, except the scientists in Italy who know the truth, but they can't speak about it. And this Pope that commissions Bernini has a problem. Has a problem because he knows that it's true, and yet he cannot change a papal bull. He cannot change a papal decree. He cannot go against the Vatican. And yet he is the Pope. What would you do if you were him? Are you going to end your papacy going down in history like his previous Pope as the man who refused to accept the truth? Or are you going to let a truth be said without the whole truth? Are you going to tell Bernini, listen, do me a piazza. I want it to look a bit like that. That's all I'm saying. You go and do it. Now, who is around Bernini when he designs the piazza? And we come to our little lady, Christina of Sweden. Remember her? Let me move here. Let's see if I find her. Flashback. Kepler. Here is actually the original design of Kepler, by the way. I was telling other people how we researched this book. Now in Google, not in Google, on Google searches, very difficult to get this. But through the deep web research of the university, we managed to consult the original books of Galileo, of Kepler, the letters, the papal letters. This is the original drawing. And you can see his design. He's converted this into an ellipse with the sun occupying one of the focal points. I hope I have Christina. I can't see too well here. Let me move ahead here. Urban VIII, Galileo, we went through this. Now, I'm going to tell you a most bizarre story, which we loved when we researched this book. While Galileo is in trial, with the year 1630, Pope Urban VIII has condemned him. He recants. He's on house arrest. And the heliocentric theory is a heresy. While all this is happening, there is one of these hermetic, like Giordano Bruno, in jail in the papal dungeon. His name is Tommaso Campanella. Tommaso Campanella. You probably heard, first time you hear of him, no? Who's heard of Tommaso Campanella ever? Somebody here, right? Tommaso Campanella has been in the papal dungeon for 27 years. 27 years, and he has been tortured and tortured. And the reason he has escaped burning at the stake is that he feigns lunacy. He pretends that he's mad. But they have to prove that he's mad in order not to burn him. One of these catch-22. And they do them, I describe the torture in the book. It's a horrible torture. Apparently they tie him on ropes by his feet and arms, and they lower him on his back over stakes, wooden stakes that puncture him. And so he has to pull himself up. He has to pull himself up, and as his muscles give down, he punctures himself and he pulls up. And if he endures this for 40 hours, then it proves that he's not mad. That was the reasoning of the papacy tortures. It's absolutely frightening. But he endures it, he survives, and he's in jail. And he's probably going to spend the rest of his time in jail, were it not for something rather odd. Urban VIII, who condemns Galileo, gets absolutely frightened because there is an astrologer in Spain. Spain was very much against the papacy in those days, who makes a prediction. He makes a prediction that the Pope will die in the next eclipse of the sun. And he gets spooked. They believed very much in astrology. And he hears that there is this strange man, Tommaso Campanella, who has written 2 books. One is called The City of the Sun. And the reason he's in the dungeon is that he wanted to have the City of the Sun built in Rome to represent the new solar ideas of the Hermetic tradition. And hence his heresy, and he's in the dungeon. But he wrote another book that he claims he can counteract the influences of the eclipse. And the Pope says, bring him to me. It's an incredible story we found, actually. This was very well hidden in the Vatican, I can tell you. And they bring him over. And he joins the Pope in the Vatican, and they perform magic, Hermetic magic, in the Vatican, in a room. In fact, the room is actually in the Palazzo Urbano 8. I'll show you the picture, actually. We found the room. Sandro Zicker, actually, and I found the room. Anyway, this is Tommaso Campanella. He's proposing the design of this City of the Sun. And not surprisingly, he's following the Copernican Keplerian truth. It's a circular city with a central monument in the middle. You can see it very faintly here. Oh my God, I've got everything small. That's the cover of his book. Can you see it there? Maybe you can enlarge this. I want to show you this because the cover of the book happens to be the logo of the Jesuits today. The City of the Sun. There it is. Okay, thanks. La Civita Solis. And here is the room, by the way. It's the ceiling of the room. How they were going to do it is this way. If you go to Rome, I'll give you the details later on if you want. We enter this room. It's a very bizarre room. It's about the size of a quarter of this hall. And it's got this kind of strange ceiling. And they painted what is some sort of strange sky imagery. Apparently now it's recognized by scientists as the first representation of the heliocentric system. You can see the Earth here. She's supposed to represent the sun. She's known as the Sapienza, wisdom, Sophia. And you can't see it too clearly here, but on her breast is the sun. And the idea is this, is that these are supposed to represent constellations, but there is no planets. There's no planets. The idea is that Tommaso Campanella, with the Pope, apparently the Pope was in total depression. And you can see him, apparently it went on for months, from 1628 to 1630 when the eclipse occurred. And the Pope is there cowering, apparently in a corner, frightened to death, while this Tommaso Campanella, who is a tough cookie here, has endured 40 days of torture, and who wants to build the City of the Sun, I think this is my break. I've got the Pope in my hands. I've got a depressed Pope who desperately needs me, and I'm going to convince him to build the city of the sun, provided I can save him from this crazy idea that he has from the ellipse. And what he does, he has candles, and he moves the candles around the room to represent the planets as they move. And apparently, well, of course, the eclipse happens, and the Pope does not die, and is very grateful. And he wants to make Campanella the astrologer of the court. But then Campanella does something rather stupid. He speaks about this magical rituals, this strange magic. Of course, the cardinals are shocked that the Pope was conducting magical Hermetic rituals, and Campanella flees. Campanella flees. And he goes to the court of Louis XIV of France. Hey, this is an incredible story, come on. Sometimes I wonder how I remember all these things. He goes to the court of Louis XIV of France, the future solar king, the Roi Soleil, the king of the sun, Louis XIV. Louis XIV. But he's not born yet. He goes there and he meets the royal couple, Louis XIII, with his Spanish wife, Anne of Austria. And they've been married for 20 years and they don't have any children. And everybody's worried about the succession. And nobody believes anymore that they're going to have children. In fact, the king refused to have intercourse with his wife. They say he was homosexual, I'm not sure. He used to like making jam for some reason. Louis XIV made jam and went and disguised himself as a seller. A weird guy. And poor Anne of Austria was alone in her bedchambers waiting for him to perform his royal duties. But Campanella comes to the court and predicts that in 9 months' time, she's going to have a baby. And nobody believes it. The year is 1637. And amazingly, in exactly 9 months' time, she has a baby, the future Louis XIV. And she convinces the queen and poor Louis XIV that he is going to be the solar king of Christianity. And he actually claims to be the Sun King. And he performed strange rituals in his life. He used to wake up at dawn with the sun and sleep and all this stuff. You can see, well, he built Versailles, the famous solar palace. But did Campanella succeed in getting him to build the city of the sun? The Egyptian city of the sun. That's what he wants them to do. And there she is with a little baby. Anne of Austria. You're looking at a research done by Dame Frances Yates, who went deep into the books, into the private diaries. Campanella is prophesying at court that the infant Louis XIV will build the Egyptian city of the sun in Paris. Did he do it? Is Paris a city of the sun? Modeled on what? What's the Egyptian city of the sun? Remember, he was trying to convince the Pope to build the city of the sun in Rome. There's another obelisk that is taken from Egypt, from the Temple of Luxor. But this time doesn't go to Rome, it goes to Paris. There it is, at the Place de la Concorde, outside the royal palace of Louis XIV, which is now the Louvre Museum. Who's been to Paris? Ooh, you've seen it, no? By the way, I don't have time for this, but there's a very strange ritual that took place there in 1998, believe it or not, with President Mubarak. Don't have time. Come. No, come to my, no, come to my work. This is getting fun, right? Look at this. Look at this. It's one of those weirdy things, really weird. Here's the Louvre Palace. Let me see if I can describe it. It looks like a sort of crab-shaped. You see it here? Now they have the famous pyramid, the glass pyramid here, right? And here is the River Seine. And here is the axis of the Louvre. You see it? And about here, the axis changes. Go through the obelisk. The obelisk is about here, outside, and it extends all the way to the new city of La Défense, to the famous Grand Arch that is built at the end. I managed to find, let's see if I got it here, a very old picture taken from the air from a balloon of the city of Paris. You can see it here very faintly. You can see it here. At the axis, and it's heading towards there, changes. And the river Seine, you see it? You see it? Yes? You do see it. You're sure you see it? You are sure you see it? But say yes or no. I don't know. Yes? You're looking at a picture of the city of Luxor in Egypt. Isn't that weird? Where the obelisk that was out there, one of them, is in Paris. In the same plan. Seems like Campanella did it. What's happening in Rome? Because this is the solar city, the Egyptian solar city, famous temple of Luxor and Karnak, the Vatican of the ancient Egyptians, the great solar temple, but it isn't the truth of Copernicus and Galileo. It should be a circle, right? No. It should be an ellipse. The great temple of the sun should be an ellipse, right? With one focal point representing the position of the sun. There's a strange story. Let me carry on this because I wrote a book called Talisman, by the way, with Graham Hancock. It's now reprinted under the title The Master Game. Are you having fun with this? Because I'm kind of... Where am I? Oh, yeah. I don't know if we have time for the Egyptian stuff. You have to come to maybe I can get 10 minutes out of it. I know. I never have time. I'm having too much fun here. The fun about these studies, and I hope you're having fun too, is you begin to see history as something totally different. It's not what we thought at all. People have been playing games here, and rather strange games. If you read Talisman, you'll see that the same thing was done in the city of Washington. The city of Washington is a totally designed Masonic plan. Anyway, I don't want to go into that. And London. But Paris, the city of the sun, the city of light. Where am I here? Yeah, the strange story is that they say that the name of Paris is from the ancient Greek, para-Isis. It means near Isis, or more precisely, near the temple of Isis. There was a temple of Isis on the Ile de la Cité, where there is the Cathedral of Notre Dame. There was the cult of Isis was very, very much practiced in Paris until the 5th century. The legend is, and this is an etching from the 15th century, the legend is that Isis came to Paris on a boat. And she lands on the shores of the Seine, and she's received by the cardinals. It's written in Old French, the Queen of Egypt, Isis. It's kind of amazing. Napoleon invaded Egypt in 1798, right? When he returns, the famous boat of Paris, the crest, the coat of arms of Paris, he asked for Isis to put on the throne with her star, the star Sirius. There she is, you can see her clearly here. Weird, isn't it? His wife, oh, you should read this book, Talisman, it's a lot of fun. His wife, his famous wife, Josephine, was the Grand Mistress of the Masonic Order of Women in the lodges of Isis. It's very strange. The French Revolution, I need to make this a bit bigger. Come on, help me. French Revolution, 1793, where they knocked down the Bastille. They knocked down the Bastille, remember? Huh? They went to charge and they took every stone down. And in 1793, they did the celebration of rejuvenation of the Republic. And they put a statue of Isis. From her nipples emerges the water of rejuvenation. You have the whole French Convention of the New Republic drinking of the waters from the nipples of Isis. They changed the calendar to an Egyptian calendar. They dechristianized France for 10 years to install a kind of Masonic, of Hermetic, of Egyptian religion. Under the veneer, under the cover, under this mantle of Christianity is the ancient cult of Egypt. And every time there is a kind of break in the mantle, it comes out. You'll see it come out in Rome now. The city of the sun is going to come out in Rome. Here we're back again. Here we're back to Bernini. Who's this strange guy here? Zucchi, his name is Nicola Zucchi, a Jesuit priest. He is the confessor of the Pope, Alexander VII, who commissions Bernini to design the piazza. He is an astronomer. And he's the only one of all the Jesuit priests who actually visits Kepler. And the reason he goes to Kepler is that Kepler is trying to prove the heliocentric theory, but he needs a telescope. And there's only 2 telescopes in Italy then built. One with Galileo and another one in the hands of the Jesuits. And he takes the telescope to Kepler. And there is no doubt that this man, the confessor of the Pope, who is commissioning the piazza, knows very well what the Keplerian diagram looks at. The first law of planetary motion, the famous 3 laws of Kepler. The first law of planetary motion is that the planets go around the sun in an elliptical path, and the sun occupies one focal point. We have protagonist number 1, that man. We have Athanasius Kircher, who is the buddy of the Pope since 30 years. He's an astronomer, Jesuit priest. He is there when the Pope commissions the design. Astronomer number 2. And now we bring astronomer number 3, this amazing little lady called Christina of Sweden. Because Christina of Sweden, let's see if we get her here. There she is. The hermaphrodite, by the way. And she's studying astronomy under who? Rene Descartes, the greatest astronomer, mathematician of history, by the way, let alone of his time. And they all are there in January 1655, when Bernini is commissioned to design the piazza. And she becomes the bosom buddy of Bernini. They're friends till his death, by the way. And the only person he calls on his deathbed many, many years later is Queen Christina. Apparently, according to him, she could speak a language to God. I'm not quite sure what language she spoke. We have 3 astronomers, highly qualified astronomers. She actually builds an observatory at the Vatican. She has 2 Jesuits working for her all the time. We have 3 astronomers. One of them is the confessor of the Pope, and they're all around Bernini, and he's designing the piazza. There's Athanasius Kircher. Whoops, what am I doing here? Whoops. And that's what he designs. He uses one focal point the fountain that exists there, and he draws an ellipse with the obelisk of the city of the sun in the middle. Remember, he said it was a truth, but that's the whole truth. Amazing. It's still a heresy. It's still a heresy, and yet he does it. He must have had, there is no doubt about it, the approval of Pope Alexander VII. It cannot be that 3 qualified astronomers of the highest level, one of them who was actually given the telescope to Kepler, who actually created this law of planetary motion, that they didn't know what he was designing. There is more to this design. They now place the second fountain. The opening is precisely 32 degrees and a half from due east. It marks the 2 solstices. You remember the solstices that we did yesterday? There is no doubt there is astronomy behind Bernini here. This is the temple of the sun, and it's in front of the Vatican. Remember that it is the Jesuits who are behind this. And remember that now, since, a year and a half, we have a Jesuit Pope. Does he know this? Does he know that his Jesuits were behind this design? The idea, in fact, here is, you can see very faintly, here's the Vatican, with the whole city of Rome, and to make it into a solar headquarters, if you like, of a world religion. Here he is. A very nice Pope, actually, Francis I. It actually took the name of Francis of Assisi, by the way. He's the first ever Jesuit Pope. Does he know or not? What do you think? No, come on, we're not going to say yes without proving it. You know me. Let's just see what happens. In March 27th of last year, every pope has to announce their crest, their royal crest, their papal crest. Can we enlarge this? I'm so very sorry. This is most interesting. This is really most interesting. Yeah, excellent. This is the Jesuit. We know this for a long time. It's uncannily the same as the City of the Sun of Campanella, who wanted to design it, right? And he puts a 5-pointed star here, which everybody said, whoopsie, the star of Isis, maybe, I don't know, what has he got in mind? He was saying it represents the Virgin. Represents the Virgin. It's true that in some iconography, the Virgin is represented by a 5-pointed star or a star, and it's very common. The other is supposed to represent a bunch, it's not grapes actually, it's some sort of bunch of leaves that represent Saint Joseph, the Virgin and Joseph, and the sun is the Jesuit sun, the son of Jesus, the solar deity. What does it prove? It proves nothing. Apart from the crest that looks like the sun, right? Here's the official announcement done on TV Repubblica. When they announce when the Pope decides on his papal crest, they announce it on television. Here is Cardinal, and I forgot his name, showing it to the Italian people. The Pope has decided on this crest. But something rather weird happens a few days later. He changes the crest. Never done before. Look what's changed. Look very carefully. Look at the star. What is it? It's gone from 5 points to 8 points. What does it mean? What does it mean? Why did it do that? You show this diagram to any astronomer, and I tell you it is the solar diagram. Why? Because you have, remember the 2 points? Solstices at sunrise, solstices at sunset, the meridian, and the latitude, east-west. Every astronomer knows that an 8-pointed circle or star represents the sun. This is so well known in astronomy. You can see it here. Even who understood this, this is the drawing of Constantine, the 8-pointed solar Jesus. Weird, huh? I'll stop here because some guys want to know about the pyramids. Is this fun? You never think of the Vatican ever the same again. I love doing this. I mean, people don't think of the pyramids the same way again. Now, the Vatican. I'm marked for life. Yeah. Well, that's me. You know, I'm interested in the history behind the history. We call it intellectual archaeology. We realize that history isn't at all what we thought it was. It is a talisman. That's right. That's right. It's now a giant talisman, and it's awoken. And we happen to wake it up. The Vatican can now say, we've got the truth here. We've got the city of the sun, the way it should be, and it is there. But we didn't wake it up. This crazy Robert Bauval and his buddies, but it's woken up. And people will go there and say, is it or is it not? Is it possible? Is it this? But that's it. It's like a Christmas tree lit up. And I can tell you, it's having one hell of an effect in Rome. The book was published in Italian a month and a half ago. No, seriously. Sandro Ziccheri was going on television next week on the news. I love it. I love this. Okay, listen. I don't have much time, and I know Dolores is going to come and drag me off here. So we're going to go and talk a bit about the pyramids. I promise you this. And what I want to tell you is 3 stories. And I'm going to be brief because we don't have much time. We have 20 minutes. The 3 stories are, and they are factual stories, the discovery of the famous doors inside the shafts of the Great Pyramid. I want to bring you to the update. The reason I want to do that is, apart from it being interesting, is because I want the world to be aware that we now have, as I was saying before, a new government, and we want to put a lot of pressure on the Egyptian authorities to proceed with these investigations. They've been stopped for the last 25 years, and we want them to restart. The other one is the possibility of a chamber under the Sphinx. Now, I know I keep saying this, and if you do, and if you can, do come tomorrow, on Monday, sorry, because I'll be showing a film. I'll be showing a film that was never shown before. You're going to be the first one to see it. Because in 1996, now you may or may not know that since 1974, there's been attempts to find the chamber under the Sphinx by the Edgar Cayce Foundation. You're aware of this? They have actually made physical attempts to find it. I've been investigating this at a very, very close level. I've met most of the Cayce people. I was the grandson of Edgar Cayce, the various players in this affair. And they had a very serious attempt, once in 1978, and the other time in 1995. 1995. They nearly got there, and they made a film about it. The film was stopped by the Egyptian authorities. It was literally legally blocked. I have a copy of it. All right? Don't ask me how. I can't tell you. The copy has emerged lately, and I brought it along. I think we can play it on a CD, and if you come tomorrow, we'll show it. You'll see a physical, real attempt to find this so-called Hall of Records. Okay? Yes. I'll tell you, and I want to tell you about what has happened since last year inside the most mysterious places of the Great Pyramid, which are the relief chambers. And these two Germans, whom I know very well, and my partner, Muriel, who has actually met them on Skype, actually. Now we meet on Skype. Dominik Golitz and Stefan Erdmann. Two rather courageous guys who attempted to finally do what Egyptologists should have done many, many years ago, is to test and examine certain anomalies that are on the walls of some of the chambers. Okay? So here we go. What do I have here? Can you go on chapter 11? Sorry, I forget this. You remember we had chapter 11? Ooh, 15 minutes. I think I can do it. All right. Wow. Is Dolores okay with that? Te adoro, Dolores. She said we can go a bit over time. All right. Here he is, Rudolf Gantenbrink, a very brave explorer. They exist these days, crazy people like me. Huh? They go and do strange exploration, and somehow they get there. In 1993, Rudolf Gantenbrink, a robotic engineer in Germany, in Munich, somehow convinced the German Archaeological Institute in Cairo to let him explore the shafts in the Great Pyramid. Now, the shafts in the Great Pyramid, as you remember, there is the King's Chamber, the Queen's Chamber, the King's Chamber. Those of the King's Chamber shoot right out. And those in the Queen's Chamber stop somewhere. Nobody knew what was at the end of them. They were discovered in 1872 by a British engineer called Wayman Dixon. There is a strange story about Wayman Dixon that I'll probably tell you tomorrow, because I was very involved with something that Wayman Dixon did in 1872, is that he found when he opened the shaft you could not see them. They did not break into the chamber. The last block was not cut through. Nobody knew they were there. But somehow he took a good guess. They said that there are shafts up there, there must be shafts down here. And he knocked on the wall and he broke into the shafts. They were unknown till 1872. Whatever is in the shafts is untouched. It's contemporary with the Great Pyramid. That's the beauty about these shafts. Whatever is in there is original. And he found three little instruments. Three little things, objects, which he smuggled out of Egypt. And they were lost till 1993. Nobody knew about these. Nobody even knew he had smuggled them out. Don't ask me how, but me being this investigator and journalist, I got a whiff of it, and we found them. We found them. I'll tell you tomorrow, because I don't want to tell you about this, but we found them, and they're now in the British Museum. And one object is very bizarre. Actually, they're very small. One is a round ball, looks like a billiard ball, made of granite. Probably used to pounce and smooth, perhaps. Another one is a piece of a ruler. That has disappeared. We know now it's in the Glasgow Museum in Glasgow, but they can't find it because they didn't give it a number. It's somewhere in the vaults. We need it desperately to carbon date. It's the only carbon datable material. The third piece is very bizarre. It's about this size, and it looks like a hook. Looks like a hook. Looks like a sort of tail of a fish. But what's interesting about it, what's very interesting about it, it's made of bronze, which the ancient Egyptians of that time were not supposed to have. They were only supposed to have copper. To make bronze, you need tin. You need tin to make bronze, to mix it with copper. And there is no tin in Egypt. that changes completely what we know of these pyramid builders. Where did they get the tin from? The nearest tin, apparently, is somewhere in the mines in England. That is how you break through these things. But, hey, what these Germans have found is even more exciting. Now, I can kind of lead you to it, because I made a promise to Dominic that he will announce the findings, right? But let's finish with the story of Gantenbrink first. So Gantenbrink, I'll show you the picture, it's lovely. I was a very good friend of Gantenbrink. You know, it's one of those funny things. I was publishing the Orion Mystery, it hadn't been published yet, and I was known, at least in Egyptological circles, to have studied the shafts with their astronomical alignments, right? And I announced the discovery of the alignment of that shaft in the Queen's chamber that he was about to explore. I had announced it publicly that it was directed to the star Sirius. I was known for this. And boy, oh boy, by sheer coincidence, he is, at that same time, beginning to explore the shaft. I didn't know about it. This is how things happen in life. It's very bizarre. I get a call from Professor Edwards. He's dead now, the greatest Egyptologist and expert on the pyramids, Sir Ivan Edwards, who calls me up and says, "Are you going to Egypt?" It was February 1993. And I said, yeah, I was planning a trip. He said, listen, I've heard that the German Institute are exploring the shafts of the Queen's Chamber. Can you find out what they're going on? I said, they won't let me. I said, no. He said, I'm going to give you a letter of introduction. This is like getting a letter of introduction from the Pope, as far as Egyptologists are concerned. So I took this letter of introduction, and they were obliged to introduce me to Rudolf Gantenbrink. We became friends. A week later, he took his robot. I was back in England. He took his robot and he climbed, and on the 22nd of March, strange enough, on the spring equinox, at 11:05, we've marked the date, he reaches the top of the shaft, 60 meters deep into the shaft, and he's stunned because at the end of the shaft is a door with two handles, two metal handles. You're going to see it in a minute. Here he is exploring the outside of the shaft. A very, very courageous man, but so Germanic. I mean, so Germanic. It's very strange. We now have two Germans again in this strange pyramid story. You know, he's one of these nuts and bolts guys. You know, he makes robots. You know, he measures everything to the millimeter, and he's, you know, what a strange man. Fate brought him there, and there he is with me in Munich after his discovery. There's the door. The urge to know what's behind this door was so big. I don't know if you remember this time. It went in every single newspaper in the world. I've been harassed. He's been harassed. I'm still being harassed by people who say, what is behind this door? And we don't know, because the Egyptian authorities have refused further exploration. They've only allowed another exploration in 2002 by National Geographic, who pierced a hole through this door to try and see with a fiber optic camera what's behind it. And to their surprise, 50 centimeters away is another door. These Egyptian architects driving everybody crazy. I'll always remember this. You can't imagine the excitement. You know, we were there in Munich having a beer together and discussing this, and he thought we were going to open it very quickly. He's now given up. He's given up. It was taken from him. This is the worst thing that happened to a discoverer. He was pushed aside, and the ex-minister of Antiquities, Dr. Zahia Hawass, appropriated himself of this discovery. And when they announced that they were going to try and open this door in 2002, almost 10 years later, he pretended that it was his. I was furious. I contacted National Geographic, and we forced them. I don't know if you remember this live show that they did in 2002, this opening, they called it the Secret Chamber, or no, Secret Chamber Reveal, they called it. But they didn't mention him. They didn't mention the discoverer. What an incredible, crazy thing. It was like the Vatican, for God's sake. Anyway, we interfered and they got into mention. Why National Geographic? Why 10 years afterwards? You may or may not know. And hey, please, Americans, put pressure if you can. After so many years, last year, the US Department of Justice has opened an investigation into a bribery case between National Geographic and Dr. Zahi Hawass. It is the biggest scandal in archaeological work. The most prestigious society in the world are being investigated for a bribery case. I don't know the outcome, and the only reason we know about it, we wouldn't have known about it, because as you know, the US Department does not declare its investigation until they complete it. Luckily, this is another strange story. I don't know how many strange people. There's a man called Matti, I always forget his name, Kochavi. Have you heard of Matti Kochavi? No? He's buddy-buddy with President Clinton. He is the man who helped capture, or rather, kill Osama bin Laden. Because of his famous deep, they call it deep web, I don't know, but he has developed a system of national security machinery. He works now for the Gulf countries. Check him out, Matti Kochavi on the internet. He runs a company called AGT, working for the American government, military government, for national security, homeland security. He developed, then he decided to enter into journalism. One of his branches is journalism. He created a company called Vocative. Google it up. Vocative does deep web research journalism. They use special search machines to find out legally what is going on around the world, and they picked up, their very first story they picked up was this US investigation of bribery with the National Geographic. I've been trying to put a lot of pressure on the US Department, they're not hearing because, of course, I'm an individual outside, to tell us what's going on. It involves the Great Pyramid, for Christ's sake, and it involves these doors. They haven't published the material, they haven't, when they explored, they haven't told us what they discovered. We don't know what they took from in there, we don't know the metal handles, we have nothing published since 2002. Anyway, that's another story. Sorry, I'm getting a bit passionate about this. Let me show you the pictures. There's Rudolf with his, there's my niece with the robot. We actually took the robot and donated it to the British Museum because in desperation, we went to the British Museum, I had a lot of friends there and says, look, Canterbury cannot do it. They've stopped him. Take the robot, put pressure on the Egyptian authorities, do it. Couldn't do it. There's me, and had a bit of hair in those days. With Whoopawet, the famous little robot. There's Professor Edward. He died in 2006. Sorry, 1996, with his wife. They're both dead now, very good friends of mine. We did a conference in Paris to tell all the senior Egyptologists around the world. Came the old buddies, there's Rudolf many years later. Anyway, that's one story. Can we go to chapter 14? This is real life stuff. I want you to get involved if you can. We want to get to it because there's something else going on now with this man that is being investigated. He hates my guts, of course. I've put a lot of pressure in the Egyptian newspapers. I've been doing this for 20 years. Here is another story. This is ongoing. Okay, here's the famous, as you enter the king's chamber. Do you see it here? King's chamber, the sarcophagus. Above the king's chamber are the so-called relief chambers. Like the shafts, they were not known, they were sealed. Totally sealed. Nobody knew they were there until 1837. 1837. comes, for some reason, British people all the time, comes a British colonel from the army, Colonel Howard Weiss. And all that was known, you see it here, a tunnel that was known again by a British man in 1763, about 100 years before, 70 years before, that entered the so-called first relief chamber. They're very low, 5 of them, about this height, except the last one, which is pitched. They call them relief chambers because Egyptologists erroneously think that they are supposed to carry the weight or prevent the weight of the pyramid on the king's chamber. It does the opposite. It does the opposite because one relief chamber would have been enough. By putting the weight of all the other relief chambers, apparently they form 2,000 tons above the roof of the king's chamber. It is actually an engineering mistake. They didn't do it to relief. They did it for another reason. We don't know the exact reason, but whatever the reason, it's important because this whole chamber is built by solid granite blocks. Now, let me tell you this. The pyramid itself, the mass of the pyramid, is built with limestone, locally quarried limestone. It's difficult enough. And they covered the pyramid with higher quality limestone called Tura limestone, which they brought from the other side of the Nile. Very crazy, but they did it. They covered the pyramid. But the king's chamber, they built it with granite blocks. They brought, because it doesn't exist where the pyramid stands. The pyramid is in Lower Egypt, near Cairo. Granite only occurs in Aswan, 600 miles further up the Nile. The blocks that are made of this chamber, I might have a picture later on, the blocks, some of them weigh 60 tons. The beams, there are 9 giant beams that form the ceiling. Each one weighs 70 to 80 tons. There's 9 beams here, and there's a further 43 of these beams forming the other ceilings. Granite, giant beams. We have no idea how they carted these beams, let alone why. Why would they want to do this? But the how. The how do you cut 600 miles down upriver, blocks, beams that are 6 or 70 tons each? I tell you, you need 2 articulated lorries to carry these things, quarried, dragged down from the quarry, you've seen the quarry in Muriel, boarded on barges, sailed down the Nile for 2 weeks, downloaded, dragged up the escarpment, lifted 50 meters to the king's chamber, and placed to form these ceilings. And they are not scratched. There isn't one scratch on these blocks. We couldn't do it today. We can, but with the highest equipment. Not only to be able to carve them, carry them, but to protect them from being damaged. How did they do it? How did they do it with a time when there wasn't supposed to be metal except copper? Now we know they might have had bronze. Without any machinery, without any iron tools, without nothing, with just ropes and sticks and brutal manpower. Well, we think we know. We think we know because of these 2 funny Germans that went in April. Here is the story. You want to hear the story? Do I have 10 minutes? Dolores, mi amor. You told me I had a bit of time. Here is Dominic Golitz, one of the Germans. I'll give you the exact date, on the 17th of April, 2013. 2 Germans one of them here, Dominic Goritz, who's become a very good friend of mine now. We have to bring him here, by the way. You'll love this. We should do a pyramid conference. How about it? Huh? Huh?
Well, send me your information anyway. Send me the information and we can contact him.
No, I'm serious about this. We want to bring Robert Schoch, the man of the Sphinx. We want to bring John West. We want to bring Graham Hancock, Dominic Goritz, Rudolf Gantenbrink. I know how to do it. Okay. Dominic Goritz enters the pyramid with Ehrman, and they have a cameraman with them called Herster, 3 Germans. They have obtained a private visit permit. Believe it or not, until today, you can get a private visit permit to visit the pyramid privately. If you can afford $1,000, that's all it takes. Seriously. It's quite amazing. It's 5,000 Egyptian pounds. You go to a travel agent in Egypt, he applies for a permit, and they give it to you. And you go before hours or after hours. I think it's crazy, but they do it. We've done it. I do it because it's allowed, but I find it amazing that you can rent the pyramid like an hotel room for 2 hours. The Great Pyramid, for God's sake, it's like going to the White House and say, I want to rent the White House for 2 hours for $1,000. They're called a psychiatric hospital, right? Anyway, we did it. We did it in March. I had 18 people on a private visit for 2 hours. Anyway, they had this private permit. Now, I'll show you the private permit. It's kind of bizarre. It's a piece of paper. You'd think there would be a contract. I mean, you rent a car and you get 3 pages of contract, right? Right? You rent the Great Pyramid and they give you a little chitty. Your name isn't on it even. It just says 3 Germans are allowed to enter the pyramid from... I'm not joking. To show you how crazy it was. That's why I'm fighting so much to protect these monuments in the right way. Anyway, they enter there, and of course, typically of these situations, they put 5 Egyptians with them, 2 inspectors. Now, it is very sad, but whoever's been to Egypt knows that it's so easy to bribe these poor inspectors. They're badly paid, they really don't know their jobs, they're not properly trained, and they're desperate, especially after the revolution, they're desperate for money. You know, for $50, you can get them to wrap the pyramid up in paper and give it to you. Now, it's very sad. I defend these people because you have to get behind the scene here. You know, it's very easy to sort of accuse people that they're doing this, but they're desperate, They have wives and children and grandparents, and they don't know how to get money. But anyway, that's another story. 5 of them entered. There's 3 inspectors, 1 guard, and the tour operator that got the permit, and a young trainee inspector, 6. We call them the Pyramid 6. They're in jail now. They're in jail because of this. Mildred and me and Dominic and several Egyptian investigators are desperately trying to get them out of jail. They've been in jail for 3 months. You don't want to be an hour in an Egyptian jail, let me tell you. There are 60 people in a room the size of a normal bedroom without water. In the summer, it's crazy. They die like flies in there. We're trying to get them out. That's another story. Anyway, they enter the pyramid with the intention of taking samples from the king's chamber. I'll show you the place. Oh, good. Anyway, it's too small, but you remember what I said. From the underside of these beams. From the underside of these beams. Why? Because it has been noticed from a long time that there are strange, dark markings on these beams. They don't make sense. Nobody knows why they're there. We've been asking, me and many others, to the Egyptian authorities to investigate. We've been asking Egyptologists to investigate for the last 50 years. They haven't done it. Finally, these 2 guys said, we're going to do it ourselves. It was arranged for them to get a ladder. Maybe I have the picture of him going up the ladder. There he is. He's actually going up the ladder. It's about 8 meters high. A ladder was arranged for them. He went up the ladder and he scratched a little bit off this. It's no big deal. No big deal. Unfortunately, yes, they did not have the authorization, apparently, to do so. And then, because they had 2 hours, this was done very quickly. Let me go back. He goes into the relief chambers. These chambers that were sealed. Now, what is so important about these chambers? The Great Pyramid, you remember, we said, was totally anonymous. It did not have inscriptions inside or outside, except when these chambers were discovered in 1837, the discoverer, this Englishman, claims to have found graffiti painted in red ochre paint. Strange enough, the first relief chamber, which was already open, did not have graffiti. But he blasted his way through, with gunpowder apparently, blasted his way through and entered the other chambers, and in the other chambers they found graffiti. And in the very last chamber where he is, he's in the one with the pitched roof, there is a cartouche painted in red ochre with the name of Khufu, Cheops. And this is the only proof, according to Egyptologists, that associates this pyramid with King Cheops, which pleases the Egyptologists. There's been a huge investigation whether this graffiti is authentic, whether the Englishman who explored this put it there. The only way to find out is to test the red ochre paint. You would have thought that Egyptologists since 1837 would have done something. Now, of course, we didn't have carbon dating in those days, but we have carbon dating for the last 50 years. We now even have better than carbon dating. We have all sorts of tests to know whether something is old or not old. They haven't done it. Now, Goritz goes up there. He's showing you a place. He has taken a bit of this graffiti. Here is the mark. You see it here? It's very enlarged. It is not from the cartouche. He was conscientious enough, it might be authentic, not to damage the name of Cheops, if it is authentic. He took it a bit from here. You're going to love this. You are going to love this as what follows. Nobody knew of this. They took their samples, they put them in, let's see if I have this. Here is a very dark, sorry, the picture isn't good enough. Here is the dark marks. Do you see them? On the ceiling of this. You see these white little spots? This is where he took some samples. He just scratched it off. And they put them in little, this is very enlarged, they put them in little plastic things and took them to Dresden in Germany, and they had it tested. Here is the samples. They took 10 samples, how much? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, from the ceiling, very, very small amount. They needed them to test. And one sample, which you've seen before, very, very small, from this graffiti. Right? At last, somebody did what the Egyptologists should have done many, many, many years ago. Nobody knew about this until they were quite open about it. They did a little take on YouTube. Here we are back on YouTube. And they put it on YouTube in November of last year. And hell broke loose. Because our famous Dr. Zahi Hawass went bananas. He went bananas and came up with some extraordinary thing. Let me show you, Mr. Here is the inspectors. I'll go back here. Okay, let me. For some reason, here is the permit, by the way. Here's how it looks. A little scribbly thing by hand in Arabic, and no clauses, nothing to tell you what you can and cannot do, no penalty clauses, no conditions. Just a piece of paper. Here's the cartouche, by the way. It says, who? Big question. Because if it isn't authentic, the whole edifice of Egyptology crumbles. At least on this pyramid. I want to get to the, oh dear. Oh, I don't know why I don't have it here. Oh, I'm stuck again. Okay, I'll finish very quickly. This is a very, very courageous man. His name is Osama Karar. He picks up the story, he sees it on YouTube, and he puts it in the newspaper. He makes a mistake. He thinks that they've taken it from the cartouche. Another Egyptologist comes along, and who comes and screams blue murder is Zahi Hawass, the ex-minister. And you know what he says? In the front pages of the Arab papers. I didn't know these guys. I had no idea who they were. In fact, I was in Italy at the time when the story broke out in November. Front page title, Belgian Jew from Alexandria, me, Robert Bauval, paid Germans to steal cartouche of King Khufu. Interpol, German secret police, UNESCO, they went bananas. You don't know the hard time we've all had about this crazy fabricated accusation. It took us a month to clear this with the authorities. Luckily, I had to find these two Germans to find out what the hell is going on. One of them, Dominic, was in New York at the time. He was surprised to even know me. We cleared the story, at least I cleared myself. But they went to arrest these 6 Egyptians. Now, the cartouche was there. There's no question about it. Let me go back here. Here's Dominic. He didn't take it from the cartouche. Here are the samples. I'm going back. After a week, Dr. Hawass made the accusation on the 10th of January. On the 10th of December. On the 17th of December, the Egyptian authorities decide to send inspectors to check. You see them there. Don't ask me how I get this information, all right? I'm serious. I'm an investigation journalist, and I have my contacts in Egypt. This is an official picture taken by the inspectors, 3 of them. Oh dear, I'm always getting stuck here. Here is one of them looking around. Here he is. You can't see him, but you can see the cartouche faintly up here. Here is another one with a cartouche. It's there. It's not stolen. It's there. It's not true that the cartouche was stolen. But. Let me get closer. Here it is. It's the actual official picture taken by the inspector. It's there. But then one of them said, an Egyptologist said, wait a minute. You can't see it. There is green marks here. They were put by the Egyptologist showing 3 white spots. Somebody scratched the paint off the red ochre, almost certainly to have it tested. Immediately, they accused the Germans again. I called Dominic Goritz, he was now in Germany, and I said, listen, you've told me a fib here. You told me you did not take it from the cartouche. But there is 3 marks, and they say that you took the ochre. Robert, with his thick German accent, I did not do this. I did not do this. Well, how are we going to prove this? And then I remembered that Robert Schoch, the man of the Giza, of the Sphinx, had been in this chamber twice. Once in 2003 and once in 2006. I called Robert at Boston. Remember, we were in Vermont. And I said, Robert, please send me pictures. We got to know whether this cartouche was damaged or not before these guys entered it. Let's see if I can find. Oh. Here is a picture of Robert Schoch in 2006. You can't see it. I'm sorry, it's too faint. The cartouche, you can see it very faintly here. The cartouche was already damaged in 2006. The picture that he took in 2003 shows the cartouche was not damaged. We now have a window, 2003, 2006. We're going to narrow this window. In any case, between 2003 and 2006, who was in charge? Dr. Zahi Hawass. You can't believe the investigation that we've started on this. The whole Egyptian secret police is on this case right now. We've narrowed it down. The last time this cartouche was seen untouched was in 2004, in July 2004. And who sees it untouched in July 2004 is Dr. Zahi Hawass. We even have a picture of it. There he is. He's actually showing the place. It's untouched. Did he or did he not? We have a picture of him after 2006. In fact, we have several pictures of him after 2006 and before this German went in, where he's, same picture, where he puts the finger, but now the cartouche is damaged. Did he know about it or not? There is only two possible explanations. Either he didn't notice, or he knew about it, and he hasn't told. Both of them are bizarre. It is like the curator of the Louvre Museum, who should know the Mona Lisa backwards, passes in front of the most important piece of artifacts in the Louvre, somebody scratches it, and he doesn't see it. Everybody can see it, except, apparently, Dr. Hawass. I'm going to get the guy arrested. He has put 6 people in jail. He has brought the National Geographic into a bribery suit investigated by US Department. This guy should be behind bars. He has stopped the exploration of the Egyptian pyramids and other exploration for the last 30 years. He's apparently in America at the moment. And I am not afraid of him. All right? Okay, I'm going to get scolded by Dolores.
Yeah, Robert, wind it up.
It's...
Wind it up, okay.
No. I'm winding it up on Monday during my... Thank you very much. Thanks for your patience.
To be continued.
I love you guys.